Call the meeting to order, please. This is the Village of Riverside's regular Board of Trustee meeting for Thursday, July 21st, 2016. The time is 7 o'clock. Please call the roll.
President Sells.
Here.
Trustee Ballard.
Here.
Trustee Collins. Here. Trustee Lumsden.
Here.
Trustee Pollock.
Here.
Trustee Selby.
Here.
Trustee Hamilton.
Here.
Village Manager Francis.
Here.
Village Attorney Molina.
Here.
Also present Village Clerk Haley.
If you'll please rise for the pledge. Thank you, and good evening to everyone that's here with us tonight, and those of you watching at home. If you are here with us tonight and you'd like to comment to the board at any time, just ask that you please be recognized by the president and make your comments from the podium so that the folks at home can hear and see what you have to say. With that, first up this evening, our presentations and public comment. We are lucky tonight to have a presentation on voter registration and election judge requirements by an official from the Cook County Clerk's David Orr's office. And sir, I'm sorry, I didn't even catch your name.
Jonathan Williams.
Jonathan, welcome, please.
Thank you, Mr. President, and trustees and distinguished members of the Village of Riverside and all the public citizens here. It's so nice to see all of you. This is a very well-attended meeting. I'm with the Cook County Clerk's Office. My name's Jonathan Williams, Manager of Community Services, and I'm here today to discuss election judges and the need for more election judges. As we know, in November 8th, we're going to have a very large and well-attended, well-attended election. In fact, we're looking for a very high turnout November 8th for the election for president and all the other offices on the ticket. And as a result, at the county clerk's office, we were anticipating this high turnout. We wanted to try and recruit as many new election judges and equipment managers as we can get, because we have a couple of new things, relatively new things that are going on in the polling place now that could potentially cause long lines and delays. And that's one of the things that we want to mitigate as best as we can by having more people participating and working as election judges. The first thing is we have electronic poll books now, whereas in the past the judges were used to looking through paper applications to find the voters' information so the voter could sign in. Now we have something that's it's supposed to speed up things, but a lot of the judges perhaps are still getting used to the whole thing. So we're looking to find more judges that are more, how should we say, comfortable with technology. And so we're trying to get the word out in as many venues as possible that we need that. Also, in March, at the March 18th election, we instituted on a permanent basis Election Day voter registration, which also complicates the judge's job and could potentially, has the potential anyway, to make for a longer line in the sign-in process. So that being said, we at the clerk's office strategized about how to generate as many people interested in being an election judge as possible. And besides a PSA campaign, which we're in the process of doing, and a social media campaign, we thought it would be nice to come to board meetings such as this, where there's obviously civic-minded people here, and also hopefully at home watching, that would get our message and want to maybe sign up to be an election judge and help with the process of voting in your local area. So that's what our message is here today. We're out to get as many people to be an election judge as possible. Let me tell you briefly about what the duties are of the election judge. Essentially, the election judges are the people who run the election in the individual precincts on election day. And so they do everything from checking in the voters to assigning them the proper ballots, either paper or plastic, like I like to say, plastic being the smart card that you use to use the touch screen. And so, and then also tabulating the results, combining the results from the paper ballots and the touchscreen ballots, and putting, balancing everything out, putting everything away, and closing up the precinct. So it's a lot of responsibility there. Also, there's a second type of judge that's involved in every precinct, and that would be the equipment manager. The equipment managers have to focus on setting up all of this equipment, the laptops, the touch screens, the paper ballot scanner, all of that, all of those moving parts. There's also a machine that consolidates, as I say, the results from the paper ballots and the touch screens and transmits the results to us at downtown. So they have to be responsible for all of that in the precincts and all the troubleshooting that involves. So the equipment managers have a very specialized function, and we also we need those as well. Now in Riverside, actually, I have the list here of judge shortages from March, and Riverside actually did pretty good as opposed to other townships. This is broken out by township. We were only short 10 judges out of required 35 on the Republican side, so that wasn't so bad. We had more than enough on the Democratic side. We had 10 more than was necessary. So here we're not doing so bad, but in neighboring Lyons, not so good there. If you were to volunteer to be an election judge, you may be assigned to nearby Lyons, but we would certainly not send you very far away from town here. You know, we keep you in the general area. We certainly need judges in Lyons Township, and that's obviously very, very nearby. So that being said, there is some compensation involved. Election judges get $175 for working. That includes attending a 4-hour training class. Same thing for, equipment managers get $325, but they also must attend a training class. Both have some online components as well, some training and testing online. So there are some, there are some components besides just working on election day. Also, we ask that the election judges and the equipment managers come the night before the election to set up all of the equipment and test it out. So there's a little more than just working on election day involved. But once you've been trained, once you set up the night before, things tend to run fairly smoothly on election day. So that being said, that's essentially our message to everyone here. We're looking for as many election judges as we can get. My director, Noah Prace, has personally said, you're supposed to have like 5 per precinct, but if we get a couple more, fine, we'll put them to work. We would even have judges that would be traffic cops, so to speak. Help people, get sorted out. Sometimes that would help alleviate some of the lines and that sort of thing. So we'll put you to work, even if we have a full complement in a precinct. We'll find something for you to do. So come one, come all. That is our message, and we hope that some people will take us up on that. I have left applications and a job description of the requirements for being an election judge. Let me just briefly go over the main one. You have to be a U.S. citizen and a registered voter in Cook County. at least 18 years of age, or if you're not 18 years of age, you can work as a high school election judge as long as you have a 3-point average on a 4 scale. So we have a robust high school program, and it's driven through the school. You have to get the approval of the principal and the parents to be out of school for working on elections. Any questions anyone has, I could entertain them, or if that's not appropriate, I can talk to people. I can be reached.
Any
Yes.
questions?
I have 2 questions. The first is, you mentioned you're short 10 Republican judges. Do people have to declare one side or another in order to be a judge?
Unfortunately, yes. Our judge system is based on the 2-party system, so you have to declare either you're a Republican or a Democrat.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Right, they have to declare. They have to. Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have independent judges.
That was, that's a
Either.
misnomer.
Well, I meant to say we don't. You have to declare. You have to declare. You have to declare.
My
a
second
party.
question is, are elected officials permitted to be judges on election days in which they are not involved?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Where are the classes?
The classes, they're regionally located. For this particular area, I don't have the specific location. I certainly provide. It's within a general area around here. I believe there's a class. I'm almost certain we have training classes in Lyons Township. So.
Anything else, folks? Great. Mr. Williams, thank you very much.
All right, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. As I say, there's materials on the table, and I can be reached. There's my numbers on that stuff. I'll leave my business cards as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up this evening is public comment. I know that there are probably some folks here for our birds and bees discussion that we're going to have later. I would suggest that you wait until we get to that point, and then we'll break them out. We'll have a time when we're going to talk about bees. We'll have a time when we're going to talk about hens. So other than bees and hens, is there anyone who would like to address the board? Mr. Gallagher.
Alex Gallagher on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce. Good evening, Mr. President, trustees, those in attendance, and to those watching at home. Sir, I come before you and the village board on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce. And normally I would appear before you in more professional attire, but it is summer, and Summerfest is just around the corner. It is this Saturday, starting at 4 o'clock with the gates opening, and music will start at 6. We will have vendors from Choo Choo, Erica's Deli, 34 will be open, and Pananos will be there. Tropical snow events will also be there. The Mason's Lodge also going to have some fresh corn on the cob available. So please, no outside food or drinks. This is a completely free event to attend. There's no admission. We will have beer there. There will be other alcoholic beverages such as sangria available. There's going to have raffle prizes for Sox tickets and Cubs tickets, Fitbit, and other contributions from local businesses. So I do look forward to seeing everyone there. The entire village is invited, and it should be a great time, our 2nd annual signature event. That's all I have for today. Thank you.
And just to add to that, I know that this year is going to be a little bit different, that there's going to be an entire section set aside for kids. So there's going to be a little train that runs around that takes kids on the train rides. There's going to be some jumpy tents and all. So this is definitely a thing for the whole family. So come out. It'll be a great time.
Can we repeat the hours on that? I don't think I picked that up or
What time?
remember.
4 o'clock till about 10:30.
4 to 10:30. Okay, thank you.
And if you want Jill and I to pour your beer, 6 to 8.
Celebrity pour. Okay.
Anyone else before we move on? Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Mary Judy, and I'm here tonight as a member of the board of the Frederick Law Olmsted Society of Riverside. And I wanted to give you an update on what we've been doing in Riverside, and some of my fellow board members are here to talk about what's here to come as well. So, in keeping with the theme of tonight's meeting of the birds and the bees, we recently hosted a lecture by Marcin Metelsky. He's the head beekeeper from the Garfield Park Conservatory, and Marston's lecture was about the whys and hows of beekeeping. That was held on March 17th. If you are interested in that lecture but you weren't able to attend, it is available on our website, olmstedsociety.org, so you can go back and take a look at that for more information from a professional beekeeper. We recently had our reflections on Riverside Poetry Contest through a special collaboration with the Riverside Public Library and the Brookfield Zoo. All of our young poets who submitted entries for the 2016 Reflections on Riverside Poetry Contest were invited to share their poems at the public reading of the zoo on June 25th. And we'd like to recognize our winners from the various grade levels tonight. At the first grade level, Ella V. from Ames presented her poem, Trees of Riverside. Our second grade winner was Claire S., also from Ames, and she read her poem, The Riverside Party. Our third grade winner was Noah W. from the Hollywood School, and Noah's poem was entitled Riverside is the Best. Our fourth grade winner was Elizabeth S. of St. Mary's School, and that poem was The Town by the River's Side. Elizabeth S., also from St. Mary in the fifth grade, read her poem, I Am Riverside. And then our junior high winner was Olivia M. From Hauser, and Olivia read Ode to the Jewel in the Forest. And our high school winner from RBHS was Isabel E., and Isabel read her Remarks on the River. So in addition to the above-named winners, 14 students received special honors for the strength of their nature themes expressed in the poetry, and 67 students received certificates of merit for participating. We attended each year's school, year-end school ceremonies, awarding gold foiled certificates to all, and delighted first place winners also received a check from the Olmsted Society and an Aunt Diana's chocolate bar iced with the Society's trademark oak tree on it. So we have fully engaged in our traditional landscape work days that go on Saturdays throughout Riverside. We're continuing the tradition of teaming with the village to help beautify our green spaces. The Olmsted Society, Frederick Law Olmsted designed the parks in Riverside to provide changing vistas for both pedestrians and vehicles. His plan can be better realized by reducing shrub overgrowth, eliminating weeds, and opening up the river view. Join us as we tame and then maintain our local public parks of Riverside. All the work days are scheduled for Saturdays from 9 until noon, with 2 Saturdays a month scheduled through September and 1 in October and November. The scheduled work days and locations are available on the website at olmstedsociety.org. And you can look for the Public Works dump truck so that you recognize the sites when you see them. Come for an hour or for 3 or whatever your schedule will allow, and supervised children are certainly welcome. Service hour credit is available for your teens and junior high kids or those in your church programs. And just bring your favorite work gloves and a water bottle, and all other supplies and snacks are going to be provided for you. The Olmsted Society continues to offer great opportunities to learn about our historic landmark village, with 6 walking tours scheduled throughout the year. The North Tour covers the area north of the railroad tracks and features the Long Common, an architecturally significant school, a place of worship designed by Jenny, and homes by Silsby, Wright, Perkins, and Purcell and Elmsley. The South Side Tour includes Swan Pond, Scotswood Common, Wright's Country Estate and Service Buildings, architecture by Jenny, Drumming, Kenny and Vinci, Whittlesley, and a home designed by Olmsted's partner, Calver Ball. The remaining tours will be held this month through October, and we encourage everyone to invite friends and family from near and far to learn about our amazing village in the forest. With that, we have a big upcoming event this September that our President, Rob Dixon, is going to tell you about, along with Tom Guardi, one of our longstanding board members.
Thanks, Mary.
Hello, I'm Robert Dixon, the president of the Olmsted Society,
Tom Gardy, treasurer.
and we're very pleased to organize a second hop stop, September 24th, Saturday, from 4 to 7 p.m. It's going to be an opportunity for local brewers to have representatives here at the train station for people to come in and sample some of these beers. It's a fundraiser for the Olmsted Society. We're planning to have music again this year, some bluegrass music and a local band, Riversiders. And we'll also have food available for sale. It's a fundraiser at $30 a ticket. We plan to have tickets on sale within the next week and a half to 2 weeks. There will be emails to all Olmsted Society members and others. We'll put it up on our Facebook page. So we hope for a good turnout.
I'm sorry, did you say the date?
The date is Saturday, September 24th.
And it'll be from 4 to 7 p.m.
We have attending some local brewers such as Buckle Down Brewing, Miskatonic Brewing, Brickstone. Quincy Street Distillery will be participating, Lake Effect Brewing, Mars Brewing, and Bridgeport. Where are some late additions? Can you recall?
You got King's Lager.
Kins Lager from Oak Park, which we're happy to join. So we're trying to mix it up. We think it'll be, we hope for good weather, and we hope for plenty of Riversiders to attend. I mean, one benefit we've seen of this event is that probably about 40 to 45% of the people who attended last year were from outside of Riverside. So it brought a number of people in who were very surprised at our beautiful community. And we're going to try to play up the idea that Riverside is truly an arboretum. And with our arboretum status, we're going to try to highlight that and create some awareness.
So we appreciate your approval of the event and your support. And thank you for your time. Do you have any questions?
Where could you get tickets?
Tickets are going, very good question. Tickets are going to be for sale at riversidehopstop.com. It's going to be online ticket sales only, and we anticipate if we have brisk ticket sales, it's quite possible it could sell out. It sold out last year prior to the event, and we want to keep as many people pleased as possible. So hopefully once we get those tickets out and available, people can go right to that webpage. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. It is a great event, and one of the things I especially like about it, not only is it something that helps one of our premier organizations, in town, FLOSS, but also it's one of the few events that really is regularly now emphasizing the importance of our downtown connection by using the train station. So I'm really glad to see that you guys have kind of made that your home for what I hope will be a tradition for many years to come.
We appreciate all the support and help with the village. We do have a session planned to coordinate with the village.
Excellent, great, thanks very much. Anyone else before we get into the heart of our agenda? Okay. Next up are the reports of village officers. The only thing I have this evening is a motion to reappoint Mark Yuku to the Riverside TV Commission for a term to expire 2019. I'd ask for a motion and a second. Motion by Mr. Ballerine, second by Ms. Collins. Any discussion? I'm just very glad that Mark has decided to continue on. The Riverside TV, I wrote a Facebook entry the other day about all the different ways you could see something that happens in this town, and the TV Commission's just doing an amazing job, and Mark's been a big part of that, so I'm glad he's back. So with that, please call the roll.
Trustee Ballerine.
Aye.
Trustee Collins.
Aye.
Trustee Lumsden.
Aye.
Trustee Pollock.
Aye.
Trustee Sedeby.
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton.
Aye.
Motion carries. And the only other thing I have is an announcement that I just learned of today, that our intrepid trustee Lumsden is heading off on his 24th Chicago to Mackinac race. So next year, with his 25th, he officially becomes an old goat. So come back safe. And that's all I have. Ms. Francis.
I just have one quick item. We sent out an e-flash earlier this afternoon regarding the movie in the park this year. It is Zootopia. It is Friday, July 29th at Big Ball Park, and activities begin at 6:45. So I would encourage everyone to come and join the Parks and Rec Department in watching Zootopia. Thanks.
Next up is the approval of the consent agenda. I have been asked to remove item G, for further discussion. With the exception of item G, I'd ask for a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Motion by Ms. Hamilton. Second by Mr. Sedovy. Please call the roll.
Trustee Valerie.
Aye.
Trustee Collins.
Aye.
Trustee Lumsden.
Aye.
Trustee Pollock.
Aye.
Trustee Sedovy.
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item G is a resolution authorizing the village manager to execute a contract in an amount not to exceed $79,420.60 with Globe Construction for the 2016 sidewalk replacement program. So there was discussion.
I asked to have this removed, and the reason I asked to have this removed is when we talked about exposed aggregate and brushed concrete, and I know that everyone's tired of hearing it, but when we got this bid back, I just want people to understand that, we're paying $79,420 to do exposed aggregate, where if we did it in brushed concrete, it would be $47,700. So roughly $31,700 premium we're paying, or the equivalent of 64%. With as many, again, I said this many times, but I think one of the things that strikes me the most is for all the driveways and all the sidewalks that residents do in our town, I don't know, I know of one person that did it in exposed aggregate. Everyone else does it in brushed concrete. Tom Guardy, I'm sorry, did yours in exposed aggregate. But I would say the vast majority, if not, I'm not going to throw numbers out, but the vast majority of residents, when asked to do work on their own property, choose to do brushed concrete. I chose to do brushed concrete. I did it on my sidewalk or on my driveway 6 years ago. It doesn't look any different than my sidewalk today. So with that being said, I just want people to know that this is a 64% increase, or $31,000 bump on a contract to go to exposed aggregate. And I will be voting against it.
Any other comment?
It's exactly right. I even had Jessica double check my math.
We're paying the 64%.
31,000 is 64% of 79,000.
The item, if you look at the itemized based on the bid tabulation, it is 7.25, I believe, versus the 11 point, Director Bailey's here, the 11.9. Thank you.
Not the whole bid is for aggregate, so you can't take the number, those two final numbers, but the aggregate compared to the brushed is a 65% increase. But there also is some brushed work in there, so that's why your number's not coming out, what you're trying to do in your head, because it's not the full. The 79 is not all brushed, or it's not all aggregate.
So on a square foot basis.
Per unit, correct.
So it's more than double per square foot.
It is.
That's completely.
Well, if it was 100%, it would be more than double, so it's at 64. So it's the difference between 7.25 and 11.90.
Further comment?
So I agree with Trustee Valerie. I mean, I understand that people like how the aggregate looks, but to me, that is not worth that much of a difference, and we have so many squares that need to be done. I mean, we've done this every year. I am in favor of the brushed. I just think that it's more important to have sidewalks replaced than it is to have something that really looks pretty. And the analogy that I always make is copper gutters. If your gutters were broken, would you not get any because you want to wait till you can afford copper, or would you get gutters so that your house doesn't fall apart? And this is the same with me with the sidewalk. I don't see waiting to do these so that we can pay for aggregate, in my opinion.
Mr. Powell?
I don't buy the opinion or the thought that we're in some kind of desperate situation with the sidewalks. We're replacing sidewalks that don't really need to be replaced. I can show you pictures from the program in 2015 in my neighborhood where there were tiny little cracks, and we're replacing it just because we're in the neighborhood. We don't save money doing that, but we're in the neighborhood, so we're having the contractor replace it. We don't save any money doing that, And if we were in an emergency situation where we had serious liability and issues, then I would think the staff would be coming to us and saying, let's just fix the bad ones. We're not doing that. We're fixing everything in a two-block area, basically, that's slightly cracked or might need replaced. If staff came to be, I don't know if I'd change my mind anyway, but I just want to make the point that the way we're acting is not in a manner where we're in a desperate situation to replace cracked sidewalks. That's my opinion.
My sidewalk in front of my house is in my lawn. I mean, I pick it up out of my lawn and put it back in the
It
sidewalk.
should be replaced.
I mean, it's,
But all I'm saying is, I can show you pictures. I went around when we marked the sidewalks last year in preparation for last year's program. I went around, was walking my dog, took pictures, and I would say 1/3 or more, and I'm being conservative, were tiny little cracks that did not present any trip hazard in any way possible. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't replace it. I'm just making the point that we don't seem to be in a desperate situation where we have to hurry up and get trip hazards fixed. Otherwise, we'd be acting differently. I'm just making that point.
If a 65% premium is not enough to change your mind, what level would it have to be at? I mean, what are you willing to pay for aggregate? Obviously, I'm not willing to pay 65% premium. So what's your number? I mean, is it no matter what we're getting aggregate, no matter what the cost?
I'm not prepared to answer that question. I haven't.
I'm just, this is a higher difference than we have seen in previous years. So.
Mr. Bailey, could I ask you to step up for a second? Just on that last point that Trustee Collins.
Was it not a 35% difference previously?
3 years ago, the contract price for exposed aggregate was $9.25 per square foot. That was a bid price. The village agreed with the contractor to extend that price to a second year. So in its third year now, it's $11.90. So it's gone from, over the last 3 years, from $9.25 to $11.90 per square foot.
So it was more like 30% premium before.
Well, the concrete's gone up as well.
Right, but I'm just
Like
saying,
crushed concrete.
but I'm just saying, the decision to be made,
But concrete went up mixed sixes to a little over 7, so not
where
the same
aggregate went
premium.
from 9 to 11.
So if we were to take the brush concrete prices, I mean, is it basically that is the premium, so to speak, for aggregate? Is it pretty much remaining constant over time as the cost for brush concrete increases as well?
It seems to be expanding somewhat. Some years ago, I was under the impression that there was about a 25% premium for exposed aggregate. And clearly this price differential per square foot is greater than that. The price of concrete generally, I understand, has gone up about 40% over the last 3 years. There was a pretty significant increase, but it still would apply equally to both PCC concrete or exposed aggregate. So, like everything else, the price is going up. And clearly, well, I mean, you folks have the points down in the discussion. If there's any other questions specifically, I could try to address them, but.
Anything else for Mr. Bailey? No? Any other comments on this? Hearing none, Mr. Ray?
Yeah.
As long as it's not a history of sidewalks again.
Richard Ray, 262 Lionel. From the discussion I heard, the sidewalk replacement program does not concentrate on those squares of sidewalk throughout the village that need to be replaced. Is that correct?
No, that is not correct. Mr. Bailey can explain it better, but when we, in fact, why don't you explain it? You know, you understand it far better than I do.
The city, or the village of Riverside has a sidewalk repair policy that's based, in fact, on a model policy from its insurance provider, the Intergovernmental Risk Management Agency. There's probably at least 60 municipalities that are members of that organization. I would be willing to bet that the vast majority have adopted that same policy. There's liability reasons to have that, the same criteria. That policy establishes 6 criteria for grading the condition of sidewalk. One would be brand new sidewalk and basically defect-free. And then the criteria is based on different types of defects. Cracks are a major issue. Vertical displacement is another issue. And going from the best to the worst, the bigger, the wider the crack, the higher it's graded, which means it would be more likely to be recommended or identified for replacement. So it's an established criteria that the inspection was based on in 2014, and that we have followed all along as you try to follow that same criteria to identify those. It's actually 3, 4, 5, and 6 are the categories or criteria that you identify for replacement.
So we had.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand yet. So what you're replacing sidewalk squares that need to be replaced throughout the village. You haven't taken a subdivision or a street or 2 streets and said, we're going to spend all our money.
Correct. We had a company called Safe Step come through and do a village-wide analysis of it and rate the various squares according to trip hazards and severity of damage.
Okay.
And we are attacking the worst first and working our way down the list.
Now, for instance, on Lionel Road, it's hazardous, literally, to walk from my house to the village hall. There are displacements which Ed has managed to fill with mortar, and it's actually worked. I didn't think it would, but it has. But some of the displacements are like this, and some of the squares are broken, and the gaps are that big, So I would assume that those are the squares that are going to be replaced under this program this year. They certainly meet the criteria that you're talking about. Am I correct?
Right. I would say there's no doubt that those meet the criteria, but there's thousands of sidewalk squares throughout the village that also meet that criteria. There's no doubt, I would never doubt that the sidewalk you're referring to is defective, hazardous, should be replaced. But when this sidewalk inspection was done in 2014, there was about 198,000 square feet of sidewalk squares that were identified that met the criteria for replacement. So it's not just on Lionel Road, you could throw a dart at the map of the village of Riverside and find some defective hazardous sidewalk.
So you are concentrating your effort then in one section of the village, is that correct?
Well, here's, in the last 3 years, the process I've used is primarily working around the central business district and then radiating out, growing out from the central business district. As far as sidewalk safety goes, the one thing that you really want to be focused on is the high pedestrian volume sidewalk. The central business district has a lot of pedestrian traffic and generates a lot of pedestrian traffic, schools, school routes. Those areas would get priority. And I've spent a lot of village resources, I'll say, over the last 5 or 6 years working in just those areas. Lately, I'm concentrating on a block-by-block basis, still working out further and further out from the central business district, but there's still a lot of, there's schools in that area also. So there's no shortage of areas to identify for sidewalk replacement. It's Lionel Road, admittedly, because we have patched it. I know it's bad, but I know there's sidewalks bad all over the village, and I have the map I provided to the village board shows the kind of the strategy.
Well, it still leaves me a little confused, but nonetheless, almost all of the sidewalks that Ed is talking about are brushed concrete, correct? The only place we have exposed aggregate concrete, and we're removing it, is downtown. So why would we be replacing, why would we go into an area that has long stretches of 30, 40, 50-year-old sidewalks which are worn and therefore slightly exposed?
I'm gonna call timeout on this discussion. We have been through this sidewalk discussion at least a half dozen times, and this board is certainly more than willing or able to do it again come this next budget cycle. But the decision to replace sidewalks with aggregate versus brushed cement was discussed ad nauseum before. So that conversation has been made. Tonight's not the time to relitigate brushed concrete and aggregate. But if any trustee or a resident wants to bring it up during budget time, we can always look at it again. But the decision was made by this board to replace sidewalk squares with brushed aggregate.
With
Exposed aggregate, I mean exposed aggregate. Yes.
Even though it's in a stretch of sidewalk that has no exposed aggregate?
Yes.
Okay.
It's true.
Yes.
It doesn't make sense, but...
We gave some leeway
We
to
gave
staff,
some leeway
right.
to our facilities folks to use good judgment if the sidewalk was already all brushed concrete, to make the cost savings and go with brushed concrete. But I think that the villagers that I spoke with did not want a bunch of dark spots, light spots, and patch quilt work in our village. And to the point about the copper gutters, our own historical commission and planning and zoning, if a home was historic, which our village is, and it had copper gutters, they would be required to replace it with copper gutters. We're trying to maintain the feel of the village, and that's very important to our folks, and that's what we're trying to do, and we're trying to balance that with the financial responsibility. And I think we've already made this decision. I think we need to support our folks that have went out and got prices. We can certainly challenge them to get better prices, because at $11, I paid $7 for exposed aggregate less than a month ago in Schaumburg. So I don't know why there's that difference there. So that's something we certainly want to look into. But whether or not it's brushed or whether or not it's exposed aggregate, I think we've already went through that. We've already made a very sound physical decision, and we need to monitor now what the costs come in at. So I do agree we need to look at why we're seeing $11 a square foot. Is it the volume we're buying? Is it the way we're executing it out there where it's spot mill around and therefore there's more operating costs or more mobilization costs or something like that? That's where I think we need to kind of start drilling into it now.
Anything else? Okay, with that, I'd ask for a motion and a second to approve the resolution, item G.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Sedeby,
Second.
by Mr. Lumsden. Please call the roll.
Trustee Valerie.
No.
Trustee Collins.
No.
Trustee Lumsden.
Aye.
Trustee Pollock.
Aye.
Trustee Sedeby.
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton.
No.
President Sells.
Aye. Moving on to reports of departments, commissions, and trustee liaisons. Are there any liaison reports this evening? Hearing none, we'll move on to ordinances and resolutions. First up is a second reading of an ordinance amending the Village of Riverside zoning ordinance relative to variation standards. Ms. Att.
We are revisiting variation standards again. At your last meeting, you reviewed the proposed text amendment to the variation standards that the Planning and Zoning Commission put before you. The trustees, you had added a couple of changes to the ordinance. We have made those to the ordinance that's before you. You will note that they are in blue. Those small changes were primarily to subsection E1. So it now reads that the Planning and Zoning Commission shall not recommend variations from the provisions of this zoning ordinance unless it shall make findings based upon the evidence presented in each specific case that, and then it goes through the standards. So that should address the comments that the village board had made regarding having the village board shall not approve and the requirements on how the evidence is presented to the commission.
So with that, I ask for a motion, a second, to approve the ordinance.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Sadovy,
Second.
second by Mr. Pollock. Is there further discussion on this item? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Trustee Valerie.
Aye.
Trustee Collins.
Aye.
Trustee Lumsden.
Aye.
Trustee Pollock.
Aye.
Trustee Sedeby.
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton.
Aye.
Motion carries. I guess you can stay there, because next up is an ordinance amending Title I Administrative, Chapter 12, Official Village Designs of the Village Code of the Village of Riverside, Illinois, relative to the official village sign and logo.
Yes, at your last meeting, our consultant, Point B Communications, was here along with representatives from our Economic Development Commission, and they presented our 3 logo concept finalists to the board. The EDC noted that their preference was logo concept 5, stating that they felt the logo best embodied our positioning statement and long-term strategic competitive advantages as identified by our consultant in our positioning process. After discussing the proposed logos, you directed staff to create an ordinance that would adopt this new logo. Once this logo is selected, Point B will finalize the image for reproduction and create our style guide for its different applications, whether it be on stationery or on shirts or on the web page, Facebook, things like that. So you have a copy of the three finalists, and then you also have the draft ordinance that includes the new logo in there. It does include our old logo in there, just so we still retain our rights to it, and then it adds the new logo as well. We have members from our EDC here as well to answer any questions you have.
I ask for a motion, a second, to approve.
So moved.
Motion by Ms.
Second.
Hamilton, second by Ms. Collins. Any further discussion on this item?
So with the old one still being in there, how is it decided which one is used? Or is the new one used and the old one is just kind of
It is
standby?
stated that it shall be as directed by the village board and the village manager.
And it's also really to avoid unauthorized use of the old one by someone that might.
Right.
It appears that's what we did the previous time, right? Because that's, okay.
Please call the roll.
Trustee Valerie.
Aye.
Trustee Collins.
Aye.
Trustee Lumsden.
Aye.
Trustee Pollock.
Aye.
Trustee Sedeby.
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton.
Aye.
Motion carries. And next is an ordinance approving a variation to allow a conforming addition to an existing non-conforming detached garage at 225 Lawton Road. Ms. Apter.
Yes. On July 14th, the Planning and Zoning Commission held a public hearing on the Harbeck's request for a variation to build a conforming addition onto a non-conforming existing garage on their property. According to Section 10-10-4 of our zoning ordinance, a building or structure that is non-conforming with respect to its bulk shall not be added to or enlarged unless permitted by subsection E. They did not meet any of the requirements of those other subsections, so this was a case where they were not allowed to do an addition onto the garage. The existing two-car garage is set back only 2.4 feet from the side property line and 2.2 feet from the rear property line, and the required setback is 3 feet. The proposed 400-square-foot addition would meet the required 3-foot setback, though. The Planning and Zoning Commission did conduct the public hearing and discussed the merits of the case. The petitioner explained that one corner of the existing garage encroaches into the required setback, and due to that, they cannot expand their garage. She also noted that this encroachment is due to the angle of the property lines, and that as you move away from the corner of the garage meets the setbacks from the rear property line. She stated the existing garage is sound, and there's no reason to tear it down. However, under the zoning code, the only way they could have a larger garage would be to tear down the existing garage and build a new one that is 6 inches over. Ms. Harbeck stated that the purpose of the addition, or not the purpose, the proposed addition will match the existing garage and it will not alter the character of the area. And her architect also noted that the extent of the nonconformity was about the thickness of a wall. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of the variation. You have a copy of their findings of fact before you, as well as the petitioner's application, pictures of the proposed garage addition, their plat of survey, and pictures of their property for your reference. The homeowner is here to answer any questions that you have, as am I.
First, I'd ask for a motion and a second to approve the variation. Motion by Mr. Lumsden, second by Ms. Collins. Discussions, questions? petitioner is here, if anyone has questions for the homeowner. Mr. Pollard?
Yes, I think that the Planning and Zoning Commission's vote, a split vote 4-1, is indicative of the process, the change we're going through. I was pleased to see the order of the agenda. I don't know if this was intentional or not, but I was pleased that the amendment regarding the standards for variation were on the agenda before this. So that makes me feel a lot more comfortable about recommending this or voting to approve this. I think this is a good example, and the timing I think is great for the village board to show the difference. I think that if they had to meet the standards of an undue hardship, as was previously in the zoning ordinance, it'd be difficult to say that this should be approved. But I think the new standards where that bar is lowered just a little bit to say practical difficulty, I think, and explaining how that includes that includes structures on the land, all that explanation, I think, given all that, then I am comfortable agreeing with the Planning and Zoning Commission and supporting this.
Further comments?
I think what's been presented is it's very easy to decide this and understand that this is appropriate for someone to do on their own property. And with the changes, I'm very pleased that P&Z pushed this forward to us.
Yes, sir.
One more comment, not really directed to the variation, but directed to the zoning ordinance and the standard that's being varied. One could make the case that this shouldn't be a variation, that it should be a text amendment. Because I wonder why we don't allow a completely conforming addition to a slightly non-conforming garage. There may be good reason for it, and I guess what I would ask, if the rest of the board agrees, that we ask staff to come back to us with some kind of report on why that regulation is in our zoning ordinance, and why it was adopted in the first place, and also their opinion of the pros and cons of having that regulation in there. I mean, there may be very good reason. There's always unintended consequences to these things, but I would like to, I don't necessarily want to get into that discussion tonight, but I'd like to see more information about that.
Did you have anything
Well, we recently adopted a text amendment back in 2014 regarding conforming additions to non-conforming houses. We limited it to the principal structure, not necessarily wanting to open the can of worms on allowing additions onto accessory buildings on the lot. Feeling that the variation process was perhaps a more appropriate way to deal with those, since it is an accessory building versus a principal building. There's a little bit more flexibility in, not flexibility, but is it that much of a hardship to have to remove an accessory building off of your property or to bring it into conformance? And so it seemed like it was more appropriate for that to go through the variation process and get that vetted a little bit more than necessarily just carte blanche allowing conforming expansions of non-conforming accessory buildings. But that's certainly something that we can revisit. And that was more a discussion that I was having at a staff level with the village attorney. And it wasn't something that the Planning and Zoning Commission brought up at the time, that why don't we allow this for accessory buildings as well? At that point, we were kind of dealing with how we were already dealing with non-conforming principal structures, which was that we were allowing the vertical expansion of the non-conforming walls so that you could go up a second story with it, but you wouldn't be allowed to extend it further back along the property.
I would like to see us explore that issue some more, either direct the Planning and Zoning Commission
take
or...
another look at this? Okay. Yes?
At Planning and Zoning.
I'm comfortable with taking it straight to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Yeah.
So that's going to delay approval
No.
of this?
No.
Oh, okay.
So are you saying that you want Planning and Zoning to look at it, or you want staff to look at it?
I would defer to what everyone else thinks is a more appropriate way to do it. I just want to make sure we're being conscientious about how we're proceeding here and that we're comfortable leaving it as it is or not.
It strikes me that something like this might be more efficiently handled by staff, since it's kind of a discrete, at least in the first instance, because it'll eventually have to go to PZC anyway.
Right.
To have it talked through, but maybe staff could take a look at it first and just get an idea. Okay.
But
I can
then,
look into that.
are they then bringing it back to us or for a
I
decision?
mean, that's kind of how we've been doing things with PZC now, is trying to really send a very clear message about what exactly we want them to be looking at. So probably bring it back to us. We have a little talk about it, and then we can crystallize what we want them to do. Okay. Hearing no further discussion, please call the roll.
Trustee Valerie.
Aye.
Trustee Collins.
Aye.
Trustee Lumsden.
Aye.
Trustee Pollock.
Aye.
Trustee Sedovey.
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Eck.
Thank you.
And the moment we've all been waiting for, birds and bees. I think you just want to give a little summary of how
Yes.
we got to where we are
Yes.
first.
Currently, as the village code stands, we do not allow the keeping of chickens or bees. On February 18th of this year, the village board discussed whether there was interest at the board level of reviewing the village code relative to this matter. The board was supportive of staff evaluating and discussing the matter further. Before you, I did provide the February minutes that discusses whether or not this matter would go to Planning and Zoning Commission or whether it would come directly back to the board. Because of how the two draft ordinances are created, it refers to the accessory structure, so it does not have to go to Planning and Zoning for a potential text amendment. Additionally, the draft language that is open for discussion only this evening requires an annual licensing fee. The first year is $50 and subsequent year renewals are $25. The village will only issue 15 licenses in 2017 if in fact this is approved. If more than 15 residents apply for a license, then a lottery system would be utilized. Licenses would be renewed if the pilot program was renewed and licensee had not received any violations related to beekeeping or the keeping of hens. The ordinance requires that the village manager submit a report to the village board prior to the end of 2017 regarding the village's experience with both pilot programs. And the village board would then decide whether or not to renew or to discontinue the program if in fact the ordinance at a later date is approved.
So where we are in this whole discussion then is we originally had a short discussion about it up here. I've always think it's a good idea to have something in front of us to actually look at to give some framework to our discussion. There was some concern about the cost of having our attorneys go out and draft ordinances for bees and hens. So I took it upon myself to do a lot of that work, I had everything reviewed, of course, by our attorneys. So what you have in front of us, what we have in front of us tonight are two draft ordinances, one for beekeeping, one for keeping of hens, that were compiled basically from model ordinances all over the country, also model ordinances and ordinances that are in effect primarily in Illinois. They are purposefully overdrafted, and I will point things out in here as we go along that you might have only seen in one ordinance or two ordinances, but what I want to do is to provide the trustees with the biggest framework possible of these regulations as we work through it, and then of course we can parse and delete and add as we go along. This is just an initial discussion. The thought will be, if this does go beyond tonight, there will be another discussion at our next meeting, and only at that point, if it still is continuing, would it then be sent to the attorneys to actually draft a formal ordinance that the board would formally approve or disapprove. So really tonight is it's almost more like a town hall. That's why I'm glad to see so many people here. We're just going to be talking about this in general tonight. The overarching question, of course, quite apart from the details and the minutiae of the ordinance, is whether this is something we want to do at all. So we're going to start with the beekeeping ordinance, and the trustees are going to discuss, both the ordinance and the broader question of whether beekeeping is something that they think is appropriate for Riverside. You're all here. If you're interested in contributing to that discussion, just raise your hand and we'd love to hear what you have to say. So with that, I will open it up to the trustees for their initial thoughts. And please don't hesitate. If anytime along the way, if you want to add something, just raise your hand and come on up. Trustees?
And we're speaking just to bees right now.
We're just speaking just to bees right now. So we can have a kind of a global discussion, or if you would prefer, I can just start walking through this ordinance. Which would do you have a preference one way or the other?
My preference would be just to have a consensus of the board that they want to talk about it all first.
Right.
Just to up or down on whether you want to talk about bees, and then if it's yes, then we'll talk about bees.
Well, I think we need to talk about it because I've had quite a few people weigh in on it, both for and against, and it's been and I think the Olmsted Society, the group that you guys put on, that presentation you did sparked a lot of interest. And so again, I wanted to personally thank you for putting that on and championing that event, because I think that calmed a lot of nerves from folks that may have some preconceived notions that may not have been accurate. So I think we owe it to the village to speak to both of these topics since we've been asked to.
Why don't you just go through the ordinance and we can add or subtract and then when we have a final, final.
Well, Doug has asked if we want to discuss it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm guessing it's going to be different on bees and chickens, the opinions, but if everyone thinks that they might consider bees under the right circumstances, then I want to know that before I go through my long list of
I don't know what the right circumstances are until we go through the.
Okay, well, that's fair enough. Then that's
All right, let's walk through the ordinance then.
Before we get to the minutia of the ordinance, hi, Tom Lupfer, beekeeper.
But not in Riverside.
Not in Riverside anymore, no. I used to have one, but I didn't know. The overwhelming majority of municipalities have no mention of bees at all in their ordinances. There's no zoning, there's nothing regulating them. And the ones that do, the regulations are to outlaw them. Or in the rare incidents, the ordinances are like this one, which are meant to be so restrictive as to not allow it in reality. I think if we go through these line by line, we'll see that there are not even 15 properties in town that would conform to these restrictions. 10,500 square feet, 20-foot setbacks, that kind of thing. If we are passing an ordinance that no one can follow, I think we're kind of wasting our time. So I would suggest the best way forward would to simply be to remove the word bees from the ordinance that outlaws them. Because I am a professional landscaper and I provide beekeeping services and chicken services to my clients. Every single chicken customer has taken that on their own, it's their pet, and I have nothing to do with it. And every single bee customer has nothing to do with it. I'm there, I'm the one who harvests, I'm the one who inspects it. If you have 3, 4, 5 bees on your property, or hives on your property, you are engaged in commercial enterprise. It's no longer a hobby. So it is currently regulated under our current zoning. You cannot have a commercial enterprise on a residential property. So I think it's a much ado about nothing with this big ordinance and going through this whole rigmarole trying to regulate this, where you already have ordinances and zoning on the books that would regulate this. Nuisance calls. You could treat it like a fence. It's not this big deal. You don't tell me to water my cat. You don't tell me to feed my dog, but you're telling me to water my bees. I think this is as written, and I understand it's throw everything in there and then work through it. But I think the ordinance that we're considering at this point is specifically written to not allow bees to be kept in Riverside. You have to go through it line by line. I mean, could we look at that and see how many properties in town would conform to that? Also, I did have a hive in town because I didn't assume, I thought Riverside was progressive. I thought we wouldn't outlaw bees, but then I realized this is the Petunia War town. So I'm like, why didn't I realize that? I had a hive all year long with 60,000 bees in it 3 feet from a public sidewalk. And not a single person mentioned it, not a single person got stung. It's because I was a responsible hive owner and I had my flyways, I had everything done right. It was only when the leaves came down that people saw the hive. Responsible hive owners aren't going to be putting their hives in the way of other people. So I would suggest that we just remove that one word from the ordinance and see what happens. If there is this overwhelming response, I really don't think we're going to have 15, 20, 40 people caring for bees. It's not something you just jump into lightly. I got stung 4 times today alone harvesting my honey. So I understand the insurance, I understand the lawyers, I understand that the village has to cover themselves, but I don't think we need this. I think this is very much overreach. So I would suggest, as a professional beekeeper, as someone who does it personally and professionally, we don't need this ordinance. It's just way too much. If there's 3, 4, 5 people in town who want to have their hives and their neighbor complains, there's systems in place to handle those complaints. Again, treat it like a fence, treat it like a zoning ordinance. I just don't think we have to go through all this. The expense could be 0. Just vote to remove one word from the existing ordinance. Chickens, on the other hand, I understand we need to regulate, we need to have zoning. It's kind of like a dog, it's kind of like a pet. Bees do not get eaten by wolves. They don't get predated. They're not making noise. It's a completely different world. So the ordinance that I just perused for a little bit, and I'm aware of all the ordinances now, believe me, I've done the research, seems to be way overreach. Let's just remove that word, see what happens, and use the systems that we already have in place to adjudicate any issues and situations that would come up on a per time basis, just like we did tonight with the non-conforming garage. I mean, that would be my preferred method. Western Springs allows them, Burr Ridge, I have hives all over the western suburbs, and it's the best honey. So you gotta try it sometime. I do have some for sale, so. Not with it.
So as part of this research effort, staff did look at 10 communities. They looked at Brookfield, Burr Ridge, Clarendon Hills, Lyons, LaGrange Park, North Riverside, Oak Park, River Forest, and Warrenville. Of those, 4 allow beekeeping: Burr Ridge, Clarendon Hills, Oak Park, and Warrenville, and then the other 6 do not allow it.
And they all had requirements of setbacks and things like that. So
and which is recommended by the Illinois Beekeeping Association. And I did, and you're quite right that this is a big ordinance. There's a lot in here. I did have John Bailey, who is our local bee expert at our farmers market, and Debbie Becker, who is a beekeeper that Rob Dixon referred to me, take a look at this, and they actually added some restrictions. So it's a mixed bag. So, are there any other general comments from the audience? No? Okay, so we can just walk through this quickly, and I think I can point to some of the things that.
Can we have the study of how many, once you guys are done, try to figure out how many parcels in town would actually allow bees? I mean, once you guys, before you pass it, you've drafted it, and before you pass it, say, okay, community development, let me know, are there 180? Or are there 80?
We're going to get to that issue, because that's one of the issues I have flagged to talk about, is the whole size of lot and number of hives thing, because that is a very relevant discussion. Starting out, let's get to that part of the discussion, and I think you'll be answered. Okay. The initial part are all just the definitions, the licensing, that kind of thing. The hives do have to be registered and maintained in accordance with the state statute, the Illinois Bees and Apiaries Act, which includes in that act the right for state inspectors to inspect aviaries at any time that they wish. One of the big concerns, if you look across the country and if you look at the various model ordinances, is the location of the hives, and also another very important part has to do with the supply, making sure that there's a fresh water supply for the bees, and that the water supply is within a proximity where the bees will start going to it, because as I've learned a lot more about bees than I ever thought I would, they are creatures of habit. Once they find a water supply, they will go to that water supply. If they lose that water supply, they'll find another water supply. And what you don't want is for it to be the neighbor's swimming pool, because once they find the swimming pool, then they're going to go to that swimming pool, and as long as there's water in that swimming pool. So the water supply is very important. I want to reiterate something that Manager Francis said. What we're contemplating here is a one-year trial pilot program and limiting the number of licenses in the first year to make sure that we can kind of wade into this. This ordinance contemplates that an apiary would consist of no more than 2 hives. It does stipulate the kind of hive that would be used, which is a hive that has a removable comb structure, so that the beekeeper can take care of the bees. One of the really interesting things, and one of the things that the trustees have up here, is a memorandum that was prepared by the city of Lafayette, Colorado, which is quite extensive. It was by far the most comprehensive study I found looking at bees and bee regulations on a municipal level. And they went through in great detail the question of setbacks. And it varies anywhere from 100 feet, 50 feet. 50 feet actually was the normal setback. And they look at it in 2 different ways, either in terms of distance from existing buildings or distance from property lines. So what this kind of hybrid ordinance has chosen is that the hive would have to be at least 30 feet from any existing structure on an adjoining parcel, and would have to be set back at least 25 feet from property lines. So this is actually, you're quite right, there are some areas which are much more permissive than that, that allow bees to be kept much closer to property lines. And then there are a lot of jurisdictions that require them to be kept much farther. The 10,500 square feet, and it shouldn't say square feet acre, I should say square feet. Originally I had in here, one of the most common demarcations is a quarter of an acre for 2 hives. Our R1AA, a quarter acre is 10,890 square feet. The minimum lot size in our R1AA zoning area is 10,500. So instead of using the quarter acre, which would then have eliminated all of the homes in the R1AA, I purposely chose the 10,500 square feet. So that allows even the minimal size lot in the R1AA. So that's why that particular number was chosen, the 10,500. But certainly, one of the things that this board should discuss would be the setbacks. So that is something that should be attended to. The other thing that is in here that is a little unusual is the fencing requirement. Flyways, which the purpose of the flyway, and Mr. Lupper, you're the beekeeper here, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but basically the point of the flyway is bees will make a beeline. They'll take a direct route to their, I've been waiting all week to say that. They'll make a direct route to their hive. And so a flyway is just a 6-foot structure because bees will come straight to the hive. So the purpose of the flyway is to keep the bee up so that the bee comes up over people's heads and then comes down into the hive. So flyways are ubiquitous. Many, in fact, I think almost every single ordinance I looked at had flyway restrictions. The fencing restriction of actually having the hive itself enclosed in a fence is more local. Westmont has it, Skokie has it, and I forget the other one that's close by that I was looking at today also had it. But this also has a requirement that fence be kept locked, which is a very unusual requirement. I only found that in the Skokie ordinance that required a padlock or a combination lock on the fence. The rationale is so that people who might have mischievous motives can't get in there and mess with the bees. Mr. Bailey, John Bailey, the beekeeper at the farmer's market, that was the only thing in here that he had qualms about. Because he said, you know, the other problem is if somebody does get in and they get in trouble with the bees, now they're locked in. So that, I would tag that as another specific thing that you guys should be concerned about. The water is critical. The maintenance of the hive to make sure that you don't have things that will attract wildlife, things like that. Everything in here that you're looking at have come from existing ordinances and mostly from model ordinances from folks who are professional beekeepers. And then we also have, toward the end of it, we have the legal part that gives the village a right to come in to inspect. We have a right to withdraw withdraw a license if there are any problems. So that's the basic structure. The idea would be it would be a year-long pilot. At the end of that year, the village manager would come to us, give us a report, and if things were working fine, then we would continue it, and if things weren't working fine, we would discontinue it. So that's basically how this ordinance was drafted.
I have a question. Perhaps I misheard you, but it's the R1AA that's 10,500 square feet.
What did I say?
R1A.
Oh, no, R1AA, that's
Yeah,
correct.
so if you look at the zoning map, what's in yellow are the only ones that would qualify.
Right.
All
Yeah,
the rest of the
thank you
village
for
would
catching,
not qualify.
Yeah. It's the R1AA that's 10,500.
Well, may not qualify.
Well, no, these are 7,000 square feet, so they wouldn't qualify.
No, because, no, that's a minimum lot size. Like, I would meet that, and I'm not yellow, where my house is.
Do you have a 10,000 square foot lot?
Yeah.
Well, then it's probably yellow on here
That's
somewhere.
not,
No, it just means how it's zoned.
Yeah, okay.
that's just a minimum
Well,
lot
I'm just
size.
looking what the requirements are.
That's
If
a
it's
minimum.
Okay, all right.
It's a minimum
I think
lot
we have
size.
someone with an answer.
They all look pretty small to me. So maybe you can have bees
I think
on
the-
your lot, but I don't think most people in Riverside would be able to.
Typically, the distinction between different zoning districts is the lot area. In Riverside, we have a lot of lots that are very large regardless. What distinguishes
My
the
lot
zoning
is
districts the
only
most in the
6,000
village is gonna be the lot width. So we have a 50-foot minimum lot width in the R1A district versus the 75 minimum lot width in the R1AA district. So really, it's the lot width that's the largest distinguisher between the two zoning districts as opposed to the lot area, because we do have a lot of property in the R1A district that does probably get close to 10,000 square feet or possibly even more. That are, they're just very deep lots. We have a lot of very deep lots. So even though they're only 50 feet wide, they might be 200, 300 feet.
But then would they meet
long.
all the setback requirements if it's 30 feet from the
So
side?
that's where the setback restriction is gonna make it a little harder for the R1A lots that do
I
meet the
still
lot
think
size
most of the
requirements
village
to
is
be
not
able to
gonna-
accommodate the hive.
What is the R1A, for people who don't know, what area of town are we talking about?
You're talking all of the second division is R1A.
Pat, if you look at
First
all of
division
this-
is primarily all R1AA. When you get into the third division, you have like Delaplane, Nuttall, Mishaw, Akenside are all R1AA, but you get like Herrick, Addison, Selborne, Northgate, you're in the R1A district there.
A number of questions. First, I think it's very well done, very well researched. I appreciate that. I've been through this process before, and I know it's a learning experience. And that is key to talk to professionals in the field, and you've done that. So, first question is, some of these are really just detailed, some are broader questions. There's a requirement that licensee, a license application, someone applying for a license, notify neighbors, and I'm okay with that, but I would like that notification to be drafted by village staff Because, and to be carefully worded to make it clear that this is a courtesy notice. It's not a notice asking you to say whether you're in favor of it or not.
Can I just, I'm really glad you picked up on that point, because that, as you might imagine, is a hot topic among these kind of, about whether you should have to let your neighbors know whether they should have a right of veto, that kind of thing. One interesting aspect that was in some of the ordinances was that the setbacks could be dependent upon notice. So let's say the standard setback is 25 feet from the property line. If a person wanting a beekeeping license could come in and show that they had agreement from their neighbors to have it closer, then there is a possibility to having a less of a setback. That was in very few, but that is a wrinkle that's out there.
That's a pretty slippery slope.
That is
I
a
still
slippery
think
slope.
I agree with Doug, and that's one of the things that I wrote down, that I think that the notification should be done by the village. And the cost of that should be borne by the licensee.
Yeah, I just don't want people to get I don't want neighbors to have the veto right. I mean, just because you've got a cranky neighbor, you don't get to have a bee, even though you meet all the requirements. That doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't seem fair. But it does seem...
You could have a cranky neighbor that's deathly allergic to bees, that has a right to have,
Well, you write that into the ordinance?
Cats, and they can't do anything about that, so.
Yeah, but the cats are supposed to be in their house. The bees don't stay in your house. You have 65,000 animals that leave their backyard. I mean, you can't equate dogs and cats with bees. Your neighbor's cat should be in their house or in their backyard. They should not be in your backyard.
Oak Park had if someone is registered allergic, they would not be allowed within 150 feet. I thought that was interesting.
That is interesting. I'd be curious to learn more about that.
Yeah.
But
I don't know that 150 feet is the right number or anything, but I just thought that was interesting that if someone came forward who was...
Excuse me, my notes keep disappearing here, but let's see. Just a quick question to staff. Staff has noted that the hive structure is considered an accessory structure already regulated by the zoning ordinance. Does that mean a building permit would or would not be required?
It says, yeah, associated building permit 2A.
Okay.
Yeah, so a building permit would be required.
Okay. Just wondered.
Can I just tack on a question to that? There are the kind of the modular. Oh wait, I'm confusing hints. Never mind. That's the next one.
And actually, I think, Doug, these questions that you're asking about bees is actually applicable to both.
Some may be, right.
Chicken. I mean, you're in the preamble of, I think, would be applicable to both.
Yeah. Because there, in the hen thing, there are kind of like prefab
Right.
coops and runs.
So, I mean, we can strike it off the other list too.
Okay.
Probably, and Mr. Lupfer touched on this, and President Sells went over at the lot size requirement. That's probably the trickiest part for me, because Mr. Lupfer's right. If we have a 10,500 square foot limit, we're really reducing the number of property owners that could do this. I would want to have compelling evidence that that's necessary to do that. A lot that's 7,000 square feet, especially when you consider, we've got these flyway zones, we've got the setbacks that are all the same, no matter the size of the property. If that beehive is 25 feet from all the property lines and the entrance is 50 feet from property lines, does it matter if you've got 3,000 more square feet on your property? And if you've got lots that are 10,500 square feet, they're next door to 7,000 square foot lots, or in a neighborhood of 7,000 square foot lots, what is the public necessity, the benefit of having that 10,500 square foot minimum? These are just questions. I don't have answers to them, but that's something, again, I would want to have compelling reason why we set that limit and exclude 2/3 of the village or half the village, whatever the number is. The standard that says 30 feet from any structures on adjoining property. Now, we already require a 25-foot setback. So we're saying you have to add an additional 5 feet if you're near a structure on an adjoining property. Am I reading that correctly?
There tends to be two ways of doing this.
Okay.
You can either, they either peg it to the closest building, or they peg it to the property line. I put both in here so you could, exactly so you could have this discussion. So,
Good.
you know, but I'll just read there, you know, in the Lafayette memo. I mean, it was really interesting, you know, that what they and this was what they ended up recommending in Colorado, was for lots or parcels greater than 1/4 acre but less than 1/2 acre, then the setback was 25 feet from property lines. And then as the lot got bigger, then they had, you know, but like for example, parcels of 1 acre but less than 5 acres, it was 50 feet. So as the lot got bigger, they moved them back. But the purpose, and I thought this was really relevant, they said staff's proposed setbacks of the beehives from property lines are intended to help lessen the impact on neighbors with children, pets, or other yard features that could negatively impact the presence of hives in the immediate area. Hive setback lines will create a buffer for the hives from children and pets that play. And one of the past president of the Illinois Beekeepers Association, you know, made it talking about residential areas, you know, and made it a point of, you know, with sidewalks. You know, you don't want a beehive next to a sidewalk, for example. So and also it has something to do with the amount of distance that the bees need to gain altitude and all kinds of things. So the 25 feet, and you have in front of you, page 2 of 8, shows you the Lafayette memo basically annotates all of their suggestions. So these come from everywhere from Utah, Maine, New York, you know, all over. So they're not arbitrary. Well, to an extent they're arbitrary, but the 25 feet seems to be ubiquitous across the country.
I was just thrown off by both the 25-foot and the 30-foot separation.
I would say if we're going to do this, we should pick one way or the other. Either pick the distance from a building or pick a property line.
Much more comfortable with the setback from the property line because
it's easier.
It's easier, and what happens when your neighbor built an addition and now it's closer?
Right.
And now, you know, so.
And I was concerned by the buildings too, because, you know, somebody might want to put something in their backyard, but the neighbor's garage is back there. Now they can't do it because it's not 30 feet from the garage. So I agree with you that I think the property line setback would be a better way to do it.
Then on the flyway barriers or wall, do we even allow a 6-foot wall, freestanding wall in the backyard?
What is our fence height?
6 feet.
And
You could have a solid wall, 6 feet.
Flyways can either be structures or they can also be
Right, no, I understand you don't have to build a wall, but I just want to make sure we weren't contradicting ourselves.
Right.
Yes, our fence ordinance is like fences, hedges, and walls, and the
Okay.
maximum height is 6 feet in the rear
Okay.
yard.
But and I'm glad you're going through this because these are some of the anomalies. You'll notice that the fencing section that we got from Skokie and Westmont, they require a 5-foot high fence. But you have to have a 6-foot high flyway, which doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And to that point, Mr. Bailey, again, the beekeeper, he didn't like this idea of fencing the aviary in all the way around. He said he thought a much safer way of doing it would be to have 2 walls, you know, 2 6-foot flyway walls with it open on the ends. But, you know, again, the purpose of the fencing is to protect somebody from inadvertently walking in. Yeah. Can you, I'm sorry.
Jennifer Fournier, 305 Maplewood. So it's my impression, and not being a beekeeper expert in this, that having the setbacks in addition to the flyaway wall, that the setbacks are really meant to create that buffer zone. And then if you're adding a flyaway wall, which is meant to do the same, is that then excessive? Can we, if we had the flyaway walls, can we have less of a setback? Are we protected with the flyaway walls? Are we protected because now they have the flight pattern and they're not as disruptive to nearby neighbors? Can there be compromise that happens there?
Yeah, I think there can. I think there's slightly two different issues, though. The flyway wall has to do with directing the bee back to the hive. The buffer has to do with keeping the aviary away from your property where your kids are playing. So they kind of address two separate kind of issues, because if you could have a flyway on the property line, but then the aviary is 2 feet from where your kids are playing on the other side of the flyway wall. So I think that's the purpose of the buffer zone. But I mean, certainly there are places that have 10 feet setbacks from the property line. So, yeah.
I think that's all. Well, I just had one other note that where it says if a hive interest is oriented toward an exterior property line within 50 feet, you might want to explain that a little bit, because someone could say that all sides of a structure face some exterior property line somewhere.
It's the in and out part
Right,
for
no, I
the
understand.
hive. Yeah, so
Right.
where they're coming and going. So if it's within the 50 feet distance, that's when these ordinances require the flyway. If they're more than 50 feet away, then the flyway isn't necessary, because the bees are going to be coming in at higher altitude anyway.
Okay, I think I understand. Okay, that's all I had.
Am I getting this more or less right?
I have one thing that, when I was talking to Mr. Bailey the other day about bees, come up to him and asked him, he says, you on the board? So I bought a jar of honey, and he invited me to sit down and discuss it with him. One of the things that he had mentioned is mite treatment. And he felt that was something that he did not mention to you, but felt it was very important. He said a honeybee can have 2 or 3 mites on them. It's very common. It's what's decimating the population. And he goes, if you think about a mite on the back of a honeybee, it'd be like a tick the size of your fist on your back. And that really is irritating. So that's what causes bees to get cranky, is these mites. I also did a little more research and found that the honeybee is actually being contemplated as an endangered species because of this mites. And there's various different types of honeybees, and this one honeybee, I can't remember the name of it, but this is one that's the U.S. government is thinking about putting it as an endangered species. But one of the reasons that they said that this is an endangered species, and this is from it, goes, managed bumblebees are full of a variety of parasites that are harmful to the wild bee population. And there are no standards to ensure that they are free of disease before they're shipped. So a lot of our bees come from California and things like that, and that's where this disease is being transferred around. So the notion that, bringing honeybees helps the population, it really does, and in many ways it hurts the population. But if we allow this, I would say that we'd have to have some sort of mite treatment that is done. He does his twice a year to his bees. I consider that no different than getting a rabies shot for your dog. He thought it was very important. He says it's his livelihood. I mean, he said that's what kills a lot of his bees, is when they come in contact with other ones. So,
after you mentioned that last night, I spent a long time today too trying to find someplace anywhere that requires that. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but I didn't find a single ordinance that addressed the Devour mite issue. But I'm quite sure that John knows what he's talking about.
Is that by chance, maybe we could look into whether the state regulations
It's not in the Bee and Aviary Act. I looked there today too. It doesn't say anything about mite control in there.
But he thought that was very important. He was actually going to come here tonight, but he lives in Kankakee. But he thought that was something that was very, very important. So that's what I did that one. That's all I have to talk about with bees.
I just had one question about if we're going to do the pilot program and offer this to 15, how does that work? Like, would the 15 be after the pilot program or just during the pilot program?
Basically, what this contemplates is we have a sign-up period. during which time people would be able to come in and make the application for a license. If there's more than 15, then there'd be a lottery to pick the 15. And so that 15 then, those would be the only 15 that would be allowed during the pilot program.
So after the pilot program?
After the pilot program, that would be a decision for the board whether they wanted to expand the number of licensees or keep it the same or
The way that this would be drafted, by defining it as a pilot program, it's like putting a sunset provision in the law. So it would force you to repass regulations, and you could, presumably make them more lenient, reduce any numerical requirement if there were no problems or whatever, but that's how.
Real quick on the pilot program, Beehive costs at least $1,000 to get started.
Could you put it?
I have more comments, but a beehive is not a shelter pet. It's not free. It costs a lot of money to get into it. So if I applied for it, I got a hive, and then the year later I was told, oh, you can't have it anymore, I would think that that would not necessarily be a fair thing to do. We're not, the investment is significant, and if you are allowing people to have beehives, I think then taking it away would not necessarily be the right thing to do.
That is actually specifically addressed in the ordinance, because we want people to understand that going in, that if you get this license for a year, you're not being vested with any right to continue it. So it's an experimental program. So, we wanted to make sure people understood that, which is why it's in the ordinance.
All right. So the two things the John Bailey discussion. John Bailey's in business selling honey in Riverside. So, and I know him professionally and personally. He's a friend of mine and a colleague. But when I hear a businessman supporting something that would freeze out his competition, I question the motives behind it. So we really do have to look at it. He's a nice guy, I understand that. But having him supporting something that would freeze everyone else out. Because if I grew my own honey here and started selling it, people would buy my honey because it's local. And that's really a big concern for these local honey producers. The other one we hear a lot about is Skokie. Skokie their ordinance was written to not allow bees. They didn't have anything on their books. They didn't restrict them. It wasn't saying we're going from not allowing bees to allowing bees. People came and said, hey, we want to have bees. It became a problem. They passed this ordinance. And I'd ask you to see how many actual hives have been implemented in Skokie. This is one of the most restrictive ordinances. I'd also ask again to see how many municipalities actually have anything on their books about bees. I'd hazard to say it's 95% of municipalities in Illinois have no mention of it. So it's not necessarily a big kerfluffle having all these bees. The other issue that everyone brings up is the allergic. I'm allergic to bees. If you have a weed in your lawn, if you have a flower in your garden, if you have a tree in your parkway, you have stinging insects. You have pollinators. By outlawing hives doesn't mean you're outlawing pollinators. Pollinators are omnipresent. Bees cover 20 square miles. So there's a huge operation in Cicero. The guy has 35 hives. We're inundated with honeybees. There's no way we can keep them out. The bumblebees, the wasps, the yellow jackets, honeybees are actually a very small percentage of the pollinators that visit a specific plant. So saying we can't have any bees here because we're allergic is a non sequitur. It is actually not, doesn't impact the discussion. The varroa mites, having a street for it, it's a pesticide. You really should be regulated to treat for that. Professionally, I'm licensed by the state of Illinois. I go through continuing education. I'm a professional. I know how to apply it. But if we had a homeowner who had a chemical and was throwing it out there, I would say that would not necessarily be a good idea.
Can I interrupt you? Mm-hmm. So do you treat yours for that?
No, actually, I'm not necessarily a honey producer. I'm doing my hives more for pollination and help the environment. I do get some honey, but I produce maybe half the amount of honey that the honey producers do. I'm very non-invasive. I don't go into my hives and look at them very often. I can't even read my own writing here, but the neighbors approved thing is also another red herring. I don't have to approve. I don't have to let my neighbor can get a pit bull who's demonstrated to be a very dangerous animal as compared to bees. They don't have to ask my permission. My neighbor's cat killed my cat in my backyard. So saying, well, your neighbor's cat and that kind of thing, we can't regulate wildlife in the way they move. Again, I would say look at the vast majority of municipalities in the state and they don't say anything. They just don't say anything. It's a non-issue. We're making a big issue, and if we pass some form of this ordinance, no one will apply for it. And this will have been exercise in futility. If you really do pass an ordinance that no one applies for or can get, I mean, we're kind of wasting our time. So I, again, go back to saying, look at what other municipalities do, not just the 4 or 5 that actually have the ordinances and the zoning and all that, but look at the statewide. How many actually do say something? Willowbrook, nothing. You know, I go into these towns and I do check now, and they say, what are you talking about? Bees? I don't know. So first off, see if that I think we're doing a lot of work here that we don't have to do, and then we're going to pass an ordinance that is too restrictive to allow anyone to participate in it, and we're following the advice of people and municipalities whose goal is to restrict access to bees. So again, I think it's a much easier solution than a big multi-point ordinance. And that's about it. Good points though, good questions, I appreciate it.
So one point just to make with regard to that, it does stipulate in here that there will be no commercial use or retail sales of bees, honeycomb, or other bee products. So people who would be doing this in their backyard would be doing it for their own use. They wouldn't be doing it for commercial use. So that's in here.
When you looked at the other municipalities, did most of them speak to bees, or they did not?
You know, that would be, I mean, this was researched by Google, so you type in bee ordinance.
Okay.
so what you get are the places that have ordinances and are considering ordinances. I don't know if you did a statewide sweep of every municipality in Illinois. I don't have any idea.
Most don't address it because it's a current trend. It's like Airbnb, you know, it's like you don't see much, but it's because it's a new thing, and the desire to keep bees and the kind of volume is a current trend. So municipalities are now being forced to consider it.
I thought you were getting ready to say something profound.
I didn't see anything, and I may have missed it, about insurance requirement.
One of the first things.
There
There
is, and that's, you guys are hitting all the odd points. That's exactly right. There is, on page 2, there's proof of liability insurance that does not exclude coverage for beekeeping activities. I would say I probably found that in a third of the ones that I looked at. It wasn't in every single one, but it was there enough that I included it for this draft for y'all to look at.
So it just has to not exclude bees, so it'd be like part of their homeowner's insurance.
Right, it doesn't have to
They
have
don't have to have
as a
separate.
name insured or anything like that. It just
Right, that's
can't
right.
be specifically excluded.
And with the fee of $50, I would like to see that fee. I mean, especially if we're talking about changing the lot sizes and going out and bringing in a survey and measuring out and blah, 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 seeing if it fits. That's staff time. So I would say that, the application fee is $50, and that's not refundable. And you bring it in with your survey and with your stuff, and you show the building director, the community development director what you're doing. When they do a site survey, find out that you can or cannot have it. I mean, that's we've spent more than $50 in time. So I would say that would have to be a non-refundable, license fee that we impose. And then again, that would be on both chickens and bees. Because it's a lot of work. I think a lot more work than $50.
I think that's probably right. Yes, sir.
Hi, do I say who I am in my address or something? Carl Crutch, 184 South Delaware. I agree with pretty much every single thing Tom said, and the concept of having a evergreen, or not the opposite, a sunset provision on whatever we establish. What if we combine both concepts and line out bees and see what happens after a year? Because, I don't know, the vast majority of Chicago is what, 3 million people? They can keep bees. I imagine that's newsworthy stuff. If there was a lot of problems with bees, we'd probably read about it in the paper. This entire discussion, I don't know, it seems like there's a lot bigger things like 40 grand in concrete to talk about and so many other things than just the non-issue.
31,000.
31,000. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Other comments? So what would you like to do? We've gone through the ordinance.
I am not willing to say that, that we just allow bees, just carte blanche. I'm not comfortable with that, because I think that we do have a responsibility as a board. Not everybody is in favor of this. This is a divided issue. And I think that we have a responsibility as a board to both of those groups. And to just say bees are allowed is saying that we're giving all of the favor to the beekeepers. And I think that we can come up with something that's reasonable for both. And I don't think this is a unnecessary activity. So I am in favor of some type of an ordinance. I'm not in favor of just saying that it's carte blanche allowed.
I'm in favor of just striking bees, but I think we do need to go through the process because there are folks that are both for and against. Maybe less on the beekeeping as on the hens. At least that's the polling that I did with.
This is supposed to be the easy one.
Yeah, well, the folks that I talked to, most of them just really didn't have an opinion one way or another, as long as it didn't impact public safety or their property. And so I think we just need to balance that out. I think that. I come from a whole different perspective because I grew up with both. So I have no fears about this, and it doesn't even worry me. But again, I do think that we do need to go through the process because there are those that are a little bit concerned about it.
Yes, sir.
I agree. I think we need to proceed cautiously. I mean, after a year, if we get 7 or 8 and they prove to not be a problem, then we can, make it permanent. I think, it's better than proceeding, with it, starting with a permanent thing and finding out that there's a problem, and then we have to go back. I'm confident that it'll work out and we'll be able to eliminate the pilot part of the program, but I think that's the prudent way to proceed. The only question I have is the lot size. It's the only really question, and I want to figure out whether we need to have that lot size or not.
Mike, Ellen? Thoughts? Either way?
No, I'm willing to continue to discuss it. I don't have any opposition to it.
Anybody else? So what I would suggest then is we kind of have brought out the issues. I think I agree, especially the setback issue is significant, the fencing issue. So we have a couple of weeks to think about this. I encourage anybody who's listening to this or anybody who's here to continue to submit your comments and thoughts to us about those and other subjects, and we will revisit these in a couple of weeks. Okay? So, moving on.
What about chickens?
We're going to talk about chickens now.
Oh, okay.
Do you think
My bees and chickens are in the same package.
The chicken stack is twice the size of the bee stack. So exactly the same process was undertaken with regard to the keeping of hens. We were lucky and Ms. Murdoff is here tonight. She has a consulting firm called Home to Roost. She did take a look at this for us and provided some comments that I passed on to the trustees. Do you want to just do the same thing, just kind of walk through this, and then we can talk about it more globally? The first thing I would point out is just a term. Ms. Murdoff pointed out that am I saying you're Murdoff, right? Is that Murdoff? She suggested that pen is not, the word run is actually the preferred term for chicken, not a chicken pen, a chicken run. So any place in here you see pen, imagine you see run. Same kind of thing in terms of, it's a very similar application process, licensing process. This does contemplate that there would be no fewer than 2, no more than 4 hens in any one yard.
Why a minimum? Do chickens get
Because they're communal. They need a partner. Roosters are prohibited, so we won't be being awakened in the early morning like the cockadoodle do. First issue is under confinement. This says all hens shall be entirely confined in a run, coop, or other enclosure used for housing hens at all times. Some municipalities, if you have a fenced-in yard, people are allowed to let their hens run in their backyard. So that's something to think about, whether we really need that confinement requirement. Exactly the same kind of setback issues were found with hens, and you can see that this also includes both variations, either distance from a dwelling or 25 feet from the property line. Of course, the issue with hens is not, bee stings and all that kind of thing. It's primarily odor and noise. So that's the requirement for the setbacks. The one place that Ms. Murdoff was especially helpful on is under requirements for structures. I was pretty detailed about the amount of square feet per hen needed in the coop, and Ms. Murdoff also suggested that somewhere in here that we would require a coop, that the coop is actually a necessary structure for the well-being of the hens. And that really, I think it's implied in here, but it isn't specified in here. So we might want to think about specifically saying that a coop is required.
At this particular, I just have a question on this thing. Could we simplify this and say
4 feet? That's what Ms. Murdoff suggested. Because she said some of these hens really aren't appropriate for our climate.
Just make one.
Yes,
basic.
please.
To the size of the coop, if you're requiring that the hens be kept in a coop all the time, then you need 10 square feet per bird because they're not getting out and running around in a run or in a yard. If you're going to have a coop and then a pen, a run in addition to that coop, 4 square feet per bird and 6 to 8 square feet in the run. So I think we could simplify the language in number 1, under requirements for structure, just include, if you're having a completely enclosed coop, 10 square feet per bird. If you have a coop plus a run, it's 4 square feet per bird plus 6 to 8 square feet in the run. And I think we could probably strike the breed requirements there. I don't think it needs to be quite that detailed.
Okay, thank you.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
I would think you'd have to have a coop. I mean, birds can't live outside.
Right. You see the miscellaneous another point that Ms. Murdoff pointed to is on page 4, you'll see it says such areas with regard to runs, coops, and other enclosures, such areas shall be thoroughly cleaned at least once every 24 hours, and all refuse and hen waste must be disposed of in a clean and sanitary fashion. That appears in some ordinances. Most ordinances have language to the effect of shall be kept reasonably clean, something like that. It doesn't give this kind of onerous every 24-hour thing. So I would suggest that would probably be something that could be better addressed.
How do you monitor
it? Yeah, exactly. So probably reasonably clean, something like that would be better. You'll see on page 4, under I3, the way in terms of the odor, we specifically state that if you can smell the hens from the property, the boundary between the properties, then it's a nuisance. So that's how we would handle the odor issue. And then the next, number 4, handles and I'll say that in my research, the noise issue, I think, is kind of a red herring, especially when you're talking about four birds. So this is not a commercial activity. This also has the right of the village to inspect at any time, and it has exactly the same supervision, suspension, revocation of licensing, that kind of thing. And it's also a 1-year program, same kind of thing, report back after 1 year, and then we would move on from there. Let's see if I missed anything else that Ms. Murtaugh had said.
You have to have electricity in the coop, right?
Pardon me?
How do you keep them warm during the winter?
Does it have to have electricity?
So the question is, how do you keep fiber optics in 478 Udale Road? How would you keep hens warm in the winter? That's an important part of why you need 2 to 4 hens. Because when you have, say, 3 hens, they're going to group together in the winter. I'm someone who's kept hens for 8 years or so, never had any electricity to the coop, and we've had some of the harshest winters in my memory, say the last 2 years or so, and no birds were severely adversely affected. They're really hardy creatures. They're absolutely quiet at night, and they huddle together for warmth in the winter. The coop is critical because they need to be kept out of the wind. The wind is the most damaging factor in the winter, so the coop needs to protect them from the wind, and so strength in numbers would be the...
What about the predator deterrent system?
Sorry, what did you say, Joe?
Predator deterrent system? I mean, I assume that works off of electricity?
I think that was a piece of the ordinance, is that right?
Yeah, it's in here somewhere,
yeah. Yeah. I'm not certain how those worked. I've never had that be an effective device among people who had kept hens. Any type of active predation that I witnessed personally, usually during the day, because if they're locked in the coop, that's not going to be an issue. They shouldn't be accessible at all in the evenings. You need to close the door, because like a raccoon, is going to walk up to a pop machine and buy a Pepsi. I mean, they're not going to be dissuaded by light per se. But I don't know if anyone has any other.
And I have to say that requirement was in very few ordinances, very few.
I actually visited a chicken coop. I sent you pictures of it, and he had a deterrent system, and he walked me around it, and it was actually pretty interesting. He had the little boxes where they roost, or then he had these posts that they stand on, and he was telling me all the different things. But I mean, his wife said that. She says, Ronnie's gotten to be a pretty darn good shot because he has a lot of issues. I mean, he lives on a pretty large piece of property out in Michigan,
But one way you could do that without power is sometimes for convenience. If you're out near the coop at night, you can have, at Home Depot they sell small solar panel, like little tiny bitty solar panels that illuminate a light on motion, and that can be a deterrent too. But you don't need power.
Please. Go ahead.
If I could address those 2 points. First of all, the question of winter, that's often a question I get in my, just interactions with the general public. The main cause of chicken discomfort during the winter is frostbite, and that's largely caused by a buildup of moisture in the coop. So it's actually important that your coop be ventilated but not drafty. Like Rob says, you want to keep out the cold winds that come through. But they're not so much, if the temperature goes down slowly, they generally can handle it. And that's also one of the things I recommend for Chicago chicken keepers is I have a whole list of cold hardy breeds. And those breeds are more adapted to the cold climate. They're dual purpose birds. They're for both meat and eggs. They have a heavier carcass. They have a lot of extra down. They were bred in, say, the New England states, in colder parts of Europe. On the other hand, breeds like the Andalusian and the white leghorn, those are Mediterranean breeds. They're not as well adapted to the cold climates. So these are birds I generally try to steer people away from birds like silkies and Polish and the Mediterranean breeds, and steer them towards birds like the silver-laced Wyandotte and the barred rock, which are better at handling the cold. And Rob is right, they do huddle together on the roost at night and keep one another warm, which is one of the reasons why it's important to have a reasonably sizable flock. One of the issues you asked about running electricity into the coop. One of the reasons I find that people do run electricity into the coop is to prevent the water from freezing. They'll have one of those heated dog bowl waterers or some sort of way of heating the water. Folks in the Chicagoland area do manage without having electricity in the coop. They'll have several different waterers available to the birds. They'll have one in the house that's thawing out. They'll have one in the coop that the birds are drinking out of. I also have had some clients who have tried working with solar panels and putting little solar panels on their coops to collect the energy from the sun during the day, and then heat the water with that energy. And there's other ways that you can keep your birds warm in the winter, or warm enough in the winter. You can, put straw bales around the coop to keep the winds from coming through, put a tarp over the top. There's a number of ways you can protect your birds from the cold. And actually, a lot of the cold hardy breeds, they have more difficulty in the hot, humid summer days than they do in the winter time. So it's kind of ironic. With regard to the predator deterrent, the vast majority, I would say probably 95% of the coops I have seen do not have predator deterrents. So I would not necessarily see that as being necessary in an ordinance. Basically what I recommend is that you sort of predator-proof your coop. So you build it using hardware cloth instead of chicken wire. Hardware cloth keeps the chickens in, it does not keep predators out, or sorry, chicken wire keeps chickens in, but it doesn't keep the predators out. The chicken wire is it's very pliable and it's not very strong. So hardware cloth is a requirement. Also, look at the types of latches that are on both your nest collection door and on your doors to the coop and run. You want latches that a 2 or 3 year old kid couldn't open to prevent raccoons with their little opposable thumbs and their big brains from getting in to have a midnight snack in your coop. And Rob is correct that it's important to shut those birds in at night. They're very susceptible to predation. So we absolutely have to have a coop, and we need to have a coop that's going to be well put together. I have seen these predator things. They're like little red lights that blink. That's the most common predator deterrent system I've seen. It's like a blinking red light, and it supposedly mimics like the eyes of a mammal or some larger predator that's going to keep the others away. So thank you.
So a chicken in a coop would arguably attract predators.
Possibly.
And they could enter the pen, but the idea is to protect them in the coop.
You can build your run in such a way.
You have to be the mic if you're going to talk.
Should I just?
Apparently.
So you can build your run in such a way, and the run there, I mean the yard that they run around in, you can predator-proof your run. If you build it using 1/4-inch square hardware cloth as the wire enclosure, you build it very solid construction. One of the things that I recommend is putting a roof across it so you don't have aerial predators coming in, hawks and owls. I don't know if an owl would come in unless there were birds in the run. The other thing you can do is sink hardware cloth down in the ground, maybe like a foot, 8 inches down in the ground, and then skirt it out from the sides of the coop. So you're creating a barrier for anything that's going to be digging up underneath. Does that answer your question?
No, it answered. I guess my point was the first point, though. I mean, I think there's no argument that they're going to attract predators that wouldn't otherwise be in the area.
And I suppose we do have the raccoons around. I live in
Sure.
Broadview, and there was one big male trundling through my backyard, and the coyotes are here. It's a matter of If the birds are well enclosed and the predators give up, they'll eventually go away, stop trying to get the birds. But, I have had clients who've had hawks come in or whatnot, they rebuild the coop and then they're good.
Before you leave.
Sure.
Chickens lay, their real production is about 6 or 8 months into their livelihood, and it lasts for a couple years. But they live for 10 years.
Depends. Usually the ones I find have been living 4 to 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do your clients do with the chickens that no longer give them what they bought them for?
That's a very good question. And this is always something that I talk about in my classes, and when I'm conferring with a client who is thinking about getting chickens, you need to be aware that the birds are not going to be producing eggs for the rest of their life. So, you may end up with a 6 or 8 year old hen that pops out a couple eggs a month. So the question to ask yourself is, are the birds pets or are the birds utility animals? And I have clients who take both opposite extremes. What I highly discourage, and I think is a travesty, is when people decide, oh, well, I'm just going to retire my hens to a farm. Nobody wants a non-productive hen. Same with nobody wants a rooster. So what usually happens, the roosters are in high
jokes.
The large issue with rooster is not necessarily that they're male or that they crow, it's that chickens don't pair bond. So you don't have a one-to-one relationship. You have one rooster to 6 or 8 hens. So anytime you hatch a batch of chicks, you're going to end up with 50% male and 50% female, and inevitably, you're going to have some boys that are left over. But we won't go there. So the folks who raise their hens as pets, sometimes they get a larger number of birds. So they might get two birds 1 year, and then add another 2 to the flock, 2 years later. And that can be kind of difficult in introducing new birds to an existing flock. They don't like that. Yeah, you can end up with dead pullets because they will kill one another. I do recommend doing there are ways to try to do it, so that they accept one another. So that's one option. That's the pets option. On the other hand, you've got folks who look at them as domesticated animals that are for food. And they'll keep them until the fall of the 2nd year. That's, my grandfather was a farmer, and you keep them till fall of the 2nd year, and then you slaughter them. And what we recommend in the chicken keeping community in Chicago is that you take them to a licensed slaughter facility, so a halal or kosher slaughtering house. And they can render a bird live to bagged and in pieces in about 5 minutes. It's very fast. And it's humane, it's quick. I've taken birds there myself. I know a number of people who've done it. So that's kind of how those issues are dealt with. But those are always things that I bring up in my classes. Make sure you think about those things. Pets or food.
I don't know if we have to have a halal in our ordinance.
Well,
I know it does say we can't slaughter.
Within the village.
Within the village.
You can certainly take them to a slaughter.
I don't know, is there a slaughterhouse around here?
You can take them to like a John's Live Poultry. I believe there's one on Grand Avenue, but it's further out. I'm sure there's some around here. And then there's also mobile slaughtering facilities that come around, but those are mostly in the country. I'm sure you could bring one to Riverside.
As long as they stayed on the outside of the town.
Right.
Bring it in at the Fourth and Fourth event.
Okay. The other day I was actually watching CNN or MSNBC, and banner across the bottom had a CDC warning. 611 cases this year so far, as until the middle of June, I think it was June 21st, of salmonella in the United States. 45 states, 10 in Illinois, 611 in 6 months. Just to give you a frame of reference, between 1990 and 2013, we had 2,100 altogether. So roughly 95 a year. So we have a 500% increase in salmonella. And they link it specifically to backyard flocks.
Specifically to backyard flocks.
That's what you could Google the CDC website. And that's what worries me, is when you allow farm animals that carry this type of stuff in salmonella into a village, and they're allowed to run around in a backyard. You know, a child comes into the backyard and plays with your child and leaves with stuff on his shoe. And I mean, there's obviously something going on. You can, again, Google it. The CDC's, it's on the CDC's website. It's also, I think, it's on the Tribune's website. It just came out on 7/19 of this year, so just 2 days ago. When I was watching the thing in the morning, I thought it was kind of ironic. And I know that people say that's not a problem, blah 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 blah, but I mean, this 611 cases is quite a few cases. I talked to a resident who had salmonella as a child, and he said it was the worst thing he ever had. I mean, he literally had to sleep in a bathtub for 2 days. It was pretty bad.
If I could speak to that, I had,
go ahead.
From what I had read and seen, the salmonella, those major salmonella outbreaks were largely linked to the large-scale chicken farms where the birds are raised in, horrific circumstances, and they're very stressed. And so the bacteria are transferred into the egg. That's when you get salmonellosis from eating eggs. As far as communicable diseases coming, yes, there is a risk of E. coli. There is a risk of salmonella. It's no more than having a pet snake or a pet turtle. You've got the salmonella risks there too with pet reptiles. I grew up on a farm, handled chickens on an absolutely daily basis. I'm sure I've eaten poop in my life. My cousin and I, we often ran around in the coop in our bare feet. Basic common sense, just wash hands after you're done handling the birds. It's the ingestion of the fecal matter that's going to lead to getting salmonellosis, rather than, if you've got it on your shoe, wipe it off. I mean, you don't want that stuff in your house, obviously. So I'll look up those studies. That's really interesting.
It says 8 multi-state outbreak of human salmonella infections linked to live poultry and backyard flocks.
Okay, I'll check it out.
It's on the CDC website.
Okay.
Any other questions for Ms. Murtaugh? She can sit down. Okay, thank you. Other comments?
So I just wanted to thank you for such a well-written and researched proposal. I thought you hit everything fairly well. The consideration to the amount of hens in a park, they only allow, I think, 2, and it's not, they need more hens to make that a happier coop. So I was happy to see that there were 4 suggested. The one thing that did concern me was, again, the setback, and I know we discussed it a little bit with the bees, but I wanted to just kind of reference what other towns nearby were doing as far as setbacks. And Western Springs says the distance needs to be in the rear yard 10 feet from the side and 5 feet from rear property line. So if you're the rear property line, you can be 5 feet back and 10 from the sides. I think that's far more reasonable than having the 25 feet that we're suggesting here. Downers Grove, again, rear yard, although they say structures need to be 7 feet from property lines. In Naperville, they're saying 30 feet from a neighbor's occupied residence. So less so about where the property lines are and where somebody else's residence may lie. And I think these are very fair, reasonable setbacks in opposition to the 25 feet that would make it very difficult for the majority of Riverside residents to have a coop. That's all.
I want to make one additional comment, if I could. I also wanted to thank the board for a very carefully thought out proposal, and I appreciate the consideration. I think backyard hens would add considerably to the quality of life in Riverside. I know that it's been a great source of enjoyment for many people that I've come into contact with in Riverside. I'd also like to point out on the topic of CDC and salmonella that the CDC does often project certain messages related to backyard hens, which are a little odd because they don't really downsize to, say, someone with 3 or 4 hens in their backyard in the way of communication of disease. And in this recent instance with the CDC, just quoting from this recent pronouncement from the CDC, in part of that warning on salmonella, they said they had written, quote, regardless of where they were purchased, all live poultry can carry salmonella bacteria, even if they look healthy and clean. So they're discussing the transmission of salmonella in poultry, in the consumption of meat typically, or eggs. So I don't know if it was directed so pointedly at backyard hens, but nobody wants salmonella. I agree with you. Thanks.
So it looks like, I can see looks of fatigue. I think we were talking. Just 2 kind of closing comments. One, when I set out to do this, there's a lot of reasons for government. There's a lot of reasons for regulation. If the goal had been to not allow this, you wouldn't have these ordinances. We simply would have voted to not do it. The goal here was because we're 11 miles from Chicago. We are not a rural community. So the balance that a board like this has to always try to strike is how do you address the concerns of both sides? The folks who want to have this experience for themselves and their family versus the folks who might be scared to death of having bees next door, or who are convinced that that they're going to attract predators or something like that. So the purpose of regulations like this are as much for protection and education as any other purpose, and that was certainly the frame of mind that I went into in trying to draft these things, to try to give the board and the residents all of the various permutations, all the various issues, so we can talk through this as a community, because this is a community decision, and that's how the decision will be made, going down the line. So I really appreciate the folks who took their time away from the Republican convention that I know that you were at home watching, to come here and talk with us about this tonight. And I'll work with staff to make some of these changes. We'll look into some of the other questions that were raised tonight, so we'll be ready to answer some more questions in a couple of weeks. So that's that for chickens and tonight.
Let me just be sure that we are not engaging our lawyers in this endeavor yet.
We are not engaging our lawyers in this endeavor. Just me, and I work cheap, as you know. I'm getting paid as much to do this as I get paid to be president. There is no new business. We do have need for an executive session this evening to consider the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees. I would ask for a motion to adjourn to executive session, not to reconvene. No final action will be taken. Motion by Mr. Lumsden, second by Mr. Sadovy. Please call the roll.
Trustee Valerie.
Aye.
Trustee Collins.
Aye.
Trustee Lumsden.
Aye.
Trustee Pollock.
Aye.
Trustee Sadovy.
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton.
Meeting is adjourned. Good night.